Good evening, fellow movie buffs. My name is Joseph Aarons, and tonight I'd like to talk to you about a very spooky but very enjoyable film, 1978's Halloween, directed by John Carpenter. I hope you're ready for a terrifying and yet very serious discussion about this film. Director John Carpenter, fresh off the success of his 1976 film Assault on Precinct 13, which was his second film, was contacted to direct a low-budget horror film, a slasher film, featuring a serial killer stalking small-town babysitters. Carpenter and then-freaking collaborator Deborah Hill wrote the screenplay, money was gathered, and production began. The result was a minimalist film, which relied upon the slow build-up of tension and then its sudden, violent release. Halloween would go on to become one of the most successful, small-budget independent films ever made, making much more money than it took to produce. And it further launched Carpenter into stardom as a skilled maker of low-budget films. While the film was well-liked upon its release, only through time would it become known as one of the most influential horror films ever made. Many of the techniques used by Carpenter and his crew would become essential to the slasher genre which Halloween would influence. While there were slasher films before Halloween, the film became so successful that it basically codified the elements of what would define the slasher genre of the 1980s, much like Birth of a Nation did for traditional Hollywood films in the 20s. Many of the plot elements and techniques in the film, such as the last girl trope and the reluctant authority figure, and the killer's point of view, would go on to be used in countless horror films of the 1980s and beyond, notably Friday the 13th and its many, many sequels. It's pretty good. Did you make this? Halloween also launched the film career of Jamie Lee Curtis, who became one of the first Scream Queens. She would go on to star in a number of films throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and then later on, yogurt commercials. Sorry. And of course, the film's main villain, Michael Myers, became a horror movie icon. But what's really interesting about him is that he's not really a character at all. He's more of an embodiment of evil. Evil made flesh. Evil incarnate. Want me to do that again? No? Alright, it's fine with me. Myers' character design is emblematic of the do-it-yourself attitude that Carpenter had about filmmaking. The visual design of the villain, Michael Myers, known as the Shape in this film, is emblematic of Carpenter's DIY attitude towards filmmaking. He's simply a man wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit and a white mask. You know, funny story about the white mask, actually. This is probably well known to most people who have seen this film, but interesting little bit of trivia. It was actually a William Shatner mask that was purchased for about $2 and spray painted white to give it a ghostly, almost ethereal image. The result's pretty terrifying, although the film might have been a little more amusing if it was just a plain William Shatner mask. I myself would have been probably more terrified of that. Rocket Man. One of the more effective things the film does is how it uses the Myers character to build fear and tension. Rather than hide him in the shadows, as the majority of films of the time did, we instead see that he is stalking Jamie Lee Curtis's character pretty much out in the open, in the daylight. Ooh. This plays into more primal fears of being stalked, being followed, especially when we're out in the sunlight where we think we're safe. We see the fear and tension building up in Jamie Lee Curtis, as she thinks she sees signs of Myers throughout her day. Not sure if she's imagining things or if there is actually a man stalking her. This is only reinforced by when other people almost come close to seeing Myers, such as her friend, and yet there's no conclusive proof. The music, which was provided by Carpenter himself, is very simple, yet effective at heightening the tension that is portrayed throughout the film. There's a distinct lack of aggressive sound effects for jump scares. Rather, silence is used effectively, as well as the low-key creeping music that Carpenter plays on his keyboards. The film's death scenes, while not especially gory or violent by today's standards, came after such an effective buildup of tension that the impact is really felt every time. My favorite is when the boyfriend of the one girl is killed and he's pinned to the wall by the butcher knife somehow, but, film logic. And Myers kind of looks at his body and tilts his head as it's hanging up on the wall, almost as if he's curious. It gives a kind of innocence to the character, who we are introduced to as a child who murders his sister for unknown reasons. So there's almost a subcurrent of interest in this character, and why is he doing what he's doing? Is he really pure evil, as Dr. Loomis seems to think he is, or is he psychotic, or... Well, the film doesn't tell us. It's up to you to imagine. Ooh. Speaking of impressive shots, how about that opening shot? Really gets you into the perspective of the character and sets the tone for the rest of the film. The entire film is actually really well shot. It's a beautiful film. There are some visual design flaws, of course, it being shot in California, even though it's supposed to be set in the Midwest. It clearly doesn't look like a Midwest October setting, but what are you gonna do? People these days just don't appreciate films like this anymore, where there's a nice slow build-up, followed by really impactful violence. I mean, they just want jump scare after jump scare after jump scare after stupid exposition dump with someone talking on Skype. They just don't make horror films like they used to, you know what I'm saying? What was the newest one? Frickin' Truth or Dare? I mean, what happened to the horror genre? I mean, we used to have good films that were also scary, alright? A horror film didn't just come out and you automatically assumed that it was a piece of shit, right? I mean, Halloween, The Shining, there's so many great horror films, and then today it's just an endless parade of crap. It's gotta stop. I like scary movies, alright? I want to go see a scary movie, but I don't want to have to sit through a bunch of bullshit about some teenagers finding a cursed board game. Shit. I mean, if you gotta copy stuff that was made in 1970s, just do it. Just do it. It doesn't matter. Just make good horror movies again. Alright? I shouldn't have to go back 30 years if I want to see a good damn horror movie. That too much to ask? Of course, all the payoff of the tension building that's been going on throughout the whole film is an exciting multi-stage climax where Jamie Lee Curtis's character is chased throughout multiple homes, followed by Michael Myers relentlessly. She's been the object of his attention the whole film, and he's desperately trying to get his hands on her. Many critics and fans as well have postulated that the film is an allegory for sexual promiscuity versus sexual innocence. All the characters that are sexually active end up dead, whereas Jamie Lee Curtis, who is sexually chaste, ends up surviving through her own resourcefulness. Carpenter himself has denied this theory, but it's an interesting way to think about it anyway. In conclusion, Halloween is, without a doubt, one of the best horror films of all time. If you're into scary movies, tense movies, thrillers, or just good movies in general, I can't recommend it more. Do yourself a favor and go watch John Carpenter's 1978 film, Halloween. But don't watch the second one. If you like weird movies, watch the third one. After that, though, you should probably just stay away. And please, for your own sake, don't watch Rob Zombie's remake.